Custom constructors and overloaded methods. Let's open up a class members project within your classes folder, and we're going to discuss custom constructors, and overloaded methods. This is our class name, and as we slide down, we see our normal constructor here. This is our default constructor. It is commented out because we have a different constructor here. We're using the colon here and the this keyword. This represents our class, and it's going to actually call a custom constructor and pass a string to it, like you can do it from within any class, but we're using the special syntax here. This is normally what you do when you inherit another object, another class, and we're doing something similar to that because we're actually calling this custom constructor and passing a string to it. Very interesting that you can do that. And what happens is this is going to pass control to this custom constructor, do whatever it says here within the block of code, and then it's going to come back here and do whatever you put within your block of code. It's only on one line. You could make multiple lines, of course, make it look like this normal way of doing things. You could also just pass control over to this without having anything up here. The interesting thing is that you're actually passing control to a custom constructor. Alright, well, that's a little bit complex. Let's talk about the basics. The basics of it is you can have a regular default constructor, as you can see here. You can only have one default constructor, so there would be a conflict by having both of these. They have the same parameter list here, so this is going to cause a problem just like a method if you overloaded a method. And overloading a method just means the same thing as working with the custom constructor. You're having a default, and then you're overloading that name, this name here, which is the class name. You're overloading it with different parameter lists and possibly multiple, as you can see here. We even have another one here with a string and an integer. So that's overloading. We're overloading that particular method. Even the class and dealing with the constructors is overloading. So that, for the most part, is how you work with your custom constructors, and we'll talk about methods as well. So if we wanted to have the functionality that, okay, we want people to instantiate our classes by having just the open and close parentheses here, as you normally see when you work with classes and things like that, when you create or instantiate an object. Well, the same thing happens when you see an object get instantiated, but you're passing a string in. That's just a custom constructor. You're saying, okay, well, we want to allow those who use the class, we want them to be able to initialize themselves very quickly. And that is going to allow them to actually pass their own string in there, give the functionality without having to set properties and things later. So it just helps you out. It helps everything run smoothly. You can put as much code as you want in between here. And this great functionality here allows you to go from here to here and then back again, just to set things up as you want to. So again, one or the other that you need to have here. We'll comment this one out. That's a custom constructor. We're continuing to move down. We have another custom constructor because we just want to pass an integer. So all of those are custom constructors to follow that default constructor. Now, within methods, it's the same thing. Now you see here that we have a print string, and then we just have a print number. Okay, those are two different methods. Then we have print number again with a boolean. We can only have one or the other of these because the parameter lists are the same. We have a void here, and we're returning a boolean here. You can't have both because the parameter lists are the same. You'll get an error. You can uncomment that and then run it, and then you'll see that you'll get an error there. If you want to overload the method, you want to give additional functionality, you want to be able to work within code that's going to compile correctly, and you want to have multiple methods with the same name, meaning you're giving additional functionality. Maybe you have print number and you want to print with integers or you want to print with longs. We see this with all the type converting functions that you get. A lot of overloaded methods. Well, we have just a regular method here without a parameter. Then we have an integer, two integers passed. Maybe we have one integer passed. Maybe we have a string, whatever type you want. You can overload by using the same name and changing the parameter lists. Nobody knows about your implementation. Nobody knows about it. So we're talking about object-oriented, and that's a great way to work. You can do this as much as you want, and that's just to be clear there. You don't want to confuse that between the other technologies, the other techniques in object-oriented programming. So when we take a peek, you see that here we're saying that we're calling that custom string, and then we're calling that default constructor string. Just like I said, we get to the custom constructor from that sort of default constructor, it passes along to that custom constructor, and then it goes back to that default constructor, and then you can see immediately after the default constructor is called. So very interesting that that works like that. You can take a look at the top of the code if you want to. Here we're just calling the default constructor. If we actually pass in a string, then we're calling the custom constructor. If we just did this, this is going to cause us to instantiate with that particular default constructor passing along to the custom constructor, as we saw in the example in the code there. So that's how it works. Here we're calling the regular method. Here we're calling another method. If we actually pass in an integer here and then follow that parameter list, then we're using the overloaded methods. So very interesting ways to work with overloading, methods, and custom constructors.